5 years ago, the most feared man in Seoul paid his mistress to abort his child. He handed her an envelope of cash and one order: kill it. I don't need a half-breed heir from a nobody. But she didn't. And tonight, through the rain-soaked streets of Gangnam, Chairman Min-ho Kwon, the Dragon of Seoul, locks eyes with a 5-year-old boy under a yellow umbrella. A boy with his jawline, his glare, his bloodline. The child he paid to erase is staring right back at him. Min-ho built an empire on ruthlessness. He's a man whose scarred eyebrow is more famous than most celebrities, whose presence can freeze a boardroom, whose reputation is written in blood. He thought money could buy him freedom from his mistakes. He was wrong, because the woman he threw away didn't just survive, she walked through hell to raise a king. And now, the biggest mistake the dragon ever made is about to become his reckoning. This is the story of a father who learns that you can't buy back what you abandoned. Hit that like button if you believe karma never misses. Subscribe now, because when the dragon tries to reclaim his thrown-away heir, everything burns. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to help us create more stories like this. 5 years before the rain in Seoul brought him to his knees, Min-ho Kwon sat in his penthouse office, 50 floors above the city. The room smelled of old leather and cold ambition. Standing on the other side of the massive mahogany desk was Ji-woo. At 22, she was just a housemaid with rough hands and a heart that still believed in fairy tales. She twisted the hem of her cheap uniform, her knuckles white, hiding the plastic stick that had just turned her world upside down. She had rehearsed this moment for 3 days. She imagined his stoic face softening. She imagined the Dragon of Seoul showing her the rare, gentle smile he saved only for their secret nights in the dark. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice trembling with terrified hope. "It's yours." Min-ho didn't stop writing. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look up at her. He simply opened a drawer, pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, and slid it across the desk. It hit the wood with a heavy, final thud. It wasn't a gift. It was a severance package. "There is 50 million won in there," Min-ho said, his voice as sharp as a scalpel. Finally, he looked up, and his eyes were empty voids. "Get an abortion, then get out of Seoul. If I see you again, the money won't be for your travel. It will be for your funeral." The silence that followed was louder than a scream. Ji-woo felt the blood drain from her face. She realized then that she wasn't his lover. She wasn't even a person to him. She was a biological liability, a smudge on his pristine resume that needed to be wiped clean. She looked at the money more than she would earn in 10 lifetimes, and then at her flat stomach. A fire ignited in her chest, burning away the fear. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She simply turned around, leaving the envelope untouched on the desk. The door clicked shut behind her. Min-ho stared at the wood, feeling a strange, sharp pain beneath his ribs. He poured a drink and told himself it was just indigestion. He had no idea he had just signed his own death warrant. While Min-ho poured his drink, convinced the problem was solved, Ji-woo was already vanishing into the shadows of the city he claimed to rule. She moved through the neon-lit streets of Seoul not as a woman, but as a prey animal sensing the predator's breath on her neck. She knew exactly how Min-ho operated. His reach was infinite. If she swiped a credit card, he would track the transaction. If she checked into a hospital, the doctors on his payroll would alert him. If she kept her phone, the GPS would be a beacon leading the hunters straight to her heart. Without hesitation, she tossed her smartphone into a sewer grate, listening to the splash of the only link to her past disappearing into the filth. But that wasn't enough. Min-ho was looking for a beautiful, long-haired girl with hope in her eyes. So, that girl had to die. In the flickering light of a grimy public restroom in the subway station, Ji-woo stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror. She took a pair of rusty craft scissors from her bag, her hands trembling violently. With a sharp inhale, she grabbed the long, silky hair that Min-ho used to run his fingers through, and she hacked it off. Clump by dark clump, The naive housemaid fell to the tiled floor. When she looked up, the woman staring back was a stranger, jagged, hard, and desperate. She bought a cash-only ticket for the last bus to Busan. It was the furthest place she could go, the edge of the peninsula. She huddled in the back seat, pulling her coat tight over her stomach, trying to disappear into the worn fabric. As the bus engine roared to life, a sleek black sedan glided into the terminal lane, idling right next to her window. Ji-woo's breath hitched in her throat. The tint was impenetrable. Was it him? Had he changed his mind? Was he here to finish the job himself? She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the door to open, waiting for the end. But the sedan slowly pulled away, disappearing into the rainy night. She was safe, for now. But as the bus merged onto the highway, Ji-woo knew the truth. She wasn't just leaving Seoul. She was entering a war for survival. The war for survival that began on that bus ride didn't turn into a battle. It turned into a slow, suffocating grind. 6 months after fleeing Seoul, Ji-woo wasn't living. She was rotting. Her home was a gojuan in the darkest corner of Busan, a windowless box no larger than a coffin. The wallpaper was peeling from the damp, and the air was heavy with the scent of black mold. She sat on the thin mattress, her back screaming in pain, unwrapping a convenience store rice triangle. It was cold, stale, and the only thing she had eaten in 24 hours. Every morning at 4 a.m., she dragged her swollen body to the docks. She worked illegal shifts in the back of a fish market, scrubbing metal trays until her fingers were raw and bleeding. The freezing water bit into her skin, and the stench of fish guts and bleach settled into her pores, a perfume of poverty she couldn't wash away, no matter how hard she scrubbed. There were moments, standing over that sink with her ankles swollen to the size of grapefruits, where she wanted to just lie down on the wet concrete and give up. But then, a sharp, demanding kick would ripple across her belly. It was a tiny, powerful reminder. She wasn't suffering for herself, she was suffering for him. But in the underworld of the poor, mercy is expensive. One afternoon, dizzy from hunger, she slipped a bruised apple destined for the trash into her apron pocket. Her boss, a cruel man with wandering hands, caught her wrist instantly. "You ungrateful thief," he roared, his voice echoing over the market crowd. "I give you work, and you steal from me? I should drag you to the police station right now." The word police hit Ji-woo harder than a physical blow. Police meant questions. Questions meant ID checks. And an ID check was a digital flare that would signal the Dragon of Seoul exactly where his prey was hiding. She didn't wait to beg. She ripped her arm free and ran, fleeing into the labyrinth of the market, homeless once again. She ran until the stench of the fish market faded, replaced by the ozone scent of impending doom. That evening, the sky didn't just open, it shattered. A massive typhoon made landfall, turning the streets of Busan into rushing rivers of black water. With no money, no ID, and the police potentially looking for a thief, Ji-woo had nowhere to go. She found a hollowed-out shell of an abandoned warehouse near the shipping docks. It was a graveyard of rusted metal and rotting pallets, but it had a roof, barely. She huddled in the driest corner, shivering violently as the wind howled through the broken windows, sounding like 1,000 screaming ghosts. Then, the real pain arrived. It wasn't the dull ache of hunger she was used to. It was a searing, tearing agony that ripped through her lower back. She gasped, clutching her stomach. It was too early. She was only 7 months along. But the stress, the running, and the starvation had taken their toll. Her body was evicting the life she had fought so hard to keep. Rain hammered against the corrugated tin roof like gunfire, masking her cries. Lying on the freezing concrete, curling around her belly, Min-ho's voice echoed in her mind, louder than the storm. "Kill it. I don't need a half-breed heir." It felt like the universe was finally obeying his command. The elements were conspiring to finish what he started in that penthouse. "No!" she screamed into the thunder, her voice cracking. "You can't have him!" But the pain was a tidal wave she couldn't swim against. Her vision blurred, the edges of the world turning gray. The cold seeped into her bones, numbing her legs. As the darkness finally dragged her under, the last thing she saw wasn't the storm. It was a silhouette standing over her, a figure looming in the lightning flash. Was it a savior? Or had the dragon finally sent someone to collect his debt? The darkness didn't lead to death. Instead, the freezing cold of the warehouse faded, replaced by the scent of sesame oil and iodine. It was the smell of miyeokguk seaweed soup, the traditional first meal for a new mother. Ji-woo opened her heavy eyelids. She wasn't in the afterlife. She was in a room barely larger than the Gojuon, but this one was warm. The shadow she had feared wasn't an assassin sent by the dragon. It was a bent-backed Halmione, a grandmother who made her living collecting cardboard scraps from the street. She had found Ji-woo in the storm and dragged her to safety on her rusted handcart. "You fought hard," the old woman rasped, her voice like grinding stones. She knelt beside the mat and handed Ji-woo a bundle wrapped in mismatched towels. But he fought harder. Ji-woo's trembling hands accepted the weight. It was a boy, tiny, fragile, but alive. She whispered his name, Jun-seo. Then, the baby shifted and opened his eyes. Ji-woo's breath caught in her throat. She expected to see her own soft, fearful brown eyes staring back. Instead, she was looking into two pitch-black obsidian pools. They were sharp, monolid, and terrifyingly intense. They were Min-ho's eyes. Even as a newborn, he didn't cry for attention. He demanded it with a gaze that seemed to judge the world around him. The Halmione noticed the shiver that ran through Ji-woo. She pointed a gnarled finger at the infant. "That one," she warned, her face serious. "He has a tiger's spirit. He is not a sheep like you. You must be strong to raise him, or he will eat the world." Ji-woo pulled Jun-seo against her chest, swearing to protect him from his own bloodline. But the world outside hadn't stopped turning. In the corner of the room, a flickering box TV played the evening news. The headline flashed in urgent red letters, "Kwon Corporation absorbs rivals. Min-ho Kwon now sole owner of the syndicate." On the screen, the father of the child in her arms looked into the camera, colder, richer, and more untouchable than ever. He wasn't just a boss anymore. He was a king. And Ji-woo was holding the only thing that could topple his throne. Time didn't heal wounds. It just calloused them. For 5 years, Ji-woo ceased to be a woman and became a machine fueled by survival. She scrubbed floors before the sun rose, packed boxes in a stifling factory at noon, and tutored spoiled children until midnight. She slept in 4-hour shifts, her youth evaporating into the steam of a harsh life, all to keep the tiger's spirit fed and clothed. And Jun-seo grew. He wasn't like other children. He didn't giggle at cartoons or chase pigeons in the park. He was silent, observant, and fiercely protective. When Ji-woo came home with blistered hands, he wouldn't cry. He would hold them gently, his small face setting into a mask of cold anger. He didn't have his mother's softness. He had his father's fire. The terrifying reality of his lineage revealed itself in kindergarten. On a sunny Tuesday, a playground bully, twice Jun-seo's size, shoved him into the dirt. The teachers rushed over, expecting the wail of a hurt child. But Jun-seo just stood up, dusted off his knees, and stared. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't scream. He simply locked those obsidian eyes onto the bully. It was a gaze devoid of fear, a look of absolute, crushing dominance. The bully didn't attack. He burst into tears out of pure, primal instinct. Later, the teacher pulled Ji-woo aside, her voice trembling. "It's not normal, Mrs. Kim," she whispered, unable to meet Ji-woo's gaze. He didn't look at that boy like a child. He looked at him like he was prey. His eyes are frightening. Ji-woo dragged him home, terrified that the dragon's blood was already manifesting. But the universe wasn't done punishing her. That evening, A letter slid under their peeling door. An eviction notice. The entire slum block had been purchased for luxury redevelopment. Ji-woo scanned the legal header, and her blood ran cold. The developer wasn't just a company, it was a ghost. Kwon Corporation. The dragon hadn't just taken her past, he had just bought the ground beneath her feet. The eviction notice left Ji-woo with a terrified realization. You cannot outrun a man who owns the ground you walk on. To save Jun-so, she had to stop running away and hide in the one place the dragon would never look right under his nose. She returned to Seoul, but not as the beautiful girl he rejected. She dyed her hair a dull, premature gray, hid her face behind thick, unflattering glasses, and hunched her shoulders to shrink her silhouette. She became invisible. She took a job as a night cleaner at the Kwon Tower. It was a suicidal irony. The safest place to hide from a predator is inside its own den. Min-ho Kwon never looked at the help. To him, they were just furniture that breathed. Every night, she ghosted through the marble corridors of the 50-story fortress. The pay was good, the hours lonely, but the real torture was the executive floor. Entering the penthouse suite to empty the trash was like walking into a mausoleum of her past. The air still clung to his scent, a heavy, intoxicating mix of sandalwood and expensive tobacco. It made her hands tremble so violently she nearly dropped her mop. Being this close to him, breathing the same air, felt like standing on the edge of a razor blade. One Tuesday, exhausted from a double shift, she rushed to finish cleaning his personal office before dawn broke. In her haste to leave before the security shift change, she didn't notice the small plastic object fall from her apron pocket, a cheap, red toy car Jun-seo had given her for protection against the monsters. She vanished into the service elevator just as the sun crested over the Han River. Hours later, Min-ho Kwon walked into his office. He didn't look at the view. He didn't look at his stocks. His eyes went straight to the floor, locking on to the bright red toy sitting alone under his mahogany desk. He picked it up, the plastic-feeling alien in his hand. He didn't have children. He didn't allow children in the building. Someone had been here, someone who didn't belong. And for the first time in 5 years, the dragon felt a shiver of curiosity. Min-ho stood in the silence of his office, the cheap red plastic car looking like a bloodstain against his immaculate suit. A normal CEO would have tossed the toy into the trash and fired the cleaning crew. But Min-ho was not a normal CEO. He was a man who survived by noticing the smallest cracks in the world around him. This wasn't just litter, it was a trace. He marched to the security control room, his presence sucking the air out of the hallway. The guards scrambled to their feet, bowing low, terrified. "Pull up the interior feed, 4 a.m. Executive suite," he commanded. On the wall of monitors, a grainy black and white figure appeared, a hunched woman in a gray uniform, moving with the heavy gait of the exhausted. She looked old, harmless. Min-ho reached out to kill the feed, satisfied it was just a careless elder. But then, the woman on the screen paused. She reached up to adjust her glasses, and for a split second, she tilted her head back to stretch. Min-ho froze. His hand hovered over the console. He saw the slender curve of her neck. He saw the specific, graceful way she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Time seemed to warp. He hit a button. Rewind. Play. Pause. Zoom. He watched her walk toward the door. It wasn't the shuffle of an old woman. It was the light, silent step of someone trying not to be seen. It was the walk of the woman who used to sneak out of his hotel room at dawn. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. She is alive. She hadn't left Seoul. She hadn't taken the money. She was here, scrubbing his floors, hiding in the shadow of his own empire. The anger flared instantly. She had defied a direct order from the dragon. But beneath the fury, a dangerous curiosity uncoiled. Why? Why choose poverty over millions? Min-ho straightened his tie, his reflection in the monitor merging with hers. "Chief Park," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. The head of security stepped forward. "Yes, Chairman?" "Find this cleaner," Min-ho whispered, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Bring her to me. And Park, do not scare her. Yet." Ji-woo clocked out at 5 p.m., exhausted but relieved. She had retrieved the toy car from Lost and Found, or so she thought, and was eager to vanish into the anonymity of the rush-hour crowd. Outside the towering glass monolith of Kwon Corp, the rain was falling in sheets again, turning Seoul into a watercolor painting of gray and neon. Standing under the bus shelter was a small figure in a yellow raincoat, Jun-so. He was 5 now, solemn and steady as a statue. He held a small umbrella, waiting for her, not like a child waiting for a mother, but like a guard waiting for a protectee. Ji-woo hurried toward him, her heart lightening. "Let's go home, baby," she called out. But before she could reach him, the street changed. The traffic didn't just stop, it was severed. 3 massive black SUVs swerved against the flow of traffic, mounting the curb and boxing them in against the glass wall of the tower. The doors flew open in unison, and a dozen men in identical black suits poured out, forming a silent, impenetrable wall. Ji-woo didn't scream. She grabbed Jun-so by the collar and shoved him behind her, her body coiled like a cornered animal ready to fight or die. Then, the center SUV's door opened. A polished Italian leather shoe stepped into a puddle, shattering the reflection of the city lights. Min-ho Kwon emerged. He didn't run. He didn't hurry. The rain seemed to bend around him, terrified to touch his suit. He walked straight toward Ji-woo, his eyes burning holes through her disguise, ignoring the child behind her entirely. He stopped inches from her face, the smell of sandalwood choking her. He looked at her gray hair, her rough hands, and felt a surge of irrational fury. "I paid you to disappear," he sneered, his voice low and dangerous. "And yet, here you are. You kept the trash." He was trying to mask the shock of seeing her alive, but the cruelty was his only defense. Ji-woo looked up, her fear incinerated by maternal rage. She met the dragon's gaze without flinching. "He is not trash," she hissed. "He is mine." Min-ho's jaw tightened. He raised his hand, reaching out to grab her arm, to force her into the car, to take control. But before his fingers could touch her, a small, cold hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. The grip on Min-ho's wrist wasn't strong enough to physically stop a grown man, but the shock of it froze him in place. Slowly, terrifyingly, 5-year-old Jun-seo stepped out from behind his mother's legs. He didn't run, he didn't cry. He positioned himself directly between the Dragon of Seoul and the woman he was trying to intimidate. Min-ho looked down, annoyed, ready to brush the child aside. But when their eyes met, the breath was knocked out of his lungs. He wasn't looking at a stranger, he was looking in a mirror. The boy had the same sharp, angular jawline, the same defiance etched into his brow. But it was the eyes, pitch black, monolid, and burning with a cold, fearless rage that shattered Min-ho's reality. It was a biological resonance so violent it made his knees weak. The nobody nurse hadn't just birthed a child. She had raised a king. The memory of that night 5 years ago crashed into Min-ho's mind like a train. Kill it. I don't need a half-breed heir. The money, the order, the cruelty. He realized, with sick, gut-wrenching horror, that he had ordered the execution of the only person on earth who was truly him. The silence of the rain was broken by a voice that was too calm, too commanding for a 5-year-old. "Don't touch her." The command hit Min-ho harder than a bullet. The Dragon of Seoul, the man who made corporations tremble, released Ji-woo's arm. His legs gave out. He dropped to his knees on the wet pavement, not in prayer, but in absolute shock, bringing him eye to level with his son. Trembling, Min-ho reached out a hand, needing to touch the ghost he thought he had exorcised. Smack. Ji-woo slapped his hand away with the ferocity of a tigress. She pulled Jun-so back, staring down at the man who had destroyed her life. He thought he could buy anything. But Min-ho Kwon just realized he sold his own soul for $200,000, and getting it back will cost him everything.